Welcome, dear listener, to this journey through the annals of history. Whether you're nestled in your bed, lounging on your couch, or perhaps taking a quiet stroll, I'm glad you've chosen to spend this time with me. Before we begin, I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from and what time of day it is for you. Feel free to leave a comment and share a bit about your corner of the globe. And if you enjoy these gentle explorations of the past, I invite you to subscribe and join our community of history enthusiasts seeking a bit of calm and wisdom from days gone by. Now let us turn our attention to a fascinating and often misunderstood era, the Middle Ages, a time spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th centuries in Europe. For many, the mere mention of this period conjures images of valiant knights, towering castles, and majestic cathedrals. But beneath the veneer of chivalry and grandeur, there lies a complex tapestry of human struggle, resilience, and ingenuity, especially when it comes to the art of healing. In our modern world, with its advanced medical technologies and vast scientific knowledge, it can be difficult to fathom what healthcare was like for our medieval ancestors. The average person in those times faced a myriad of challenges, from the ever-present threat of infectious diseases to the limitations of contemporary understanding of the human body. Yet even in the face of such adversity, people found ways to care for the sick, tend to the wounded, and seek comfort in the face of suffering. Over the course of our time together, we'll embark on a journey through the landscapes of medieval healthcare. We'll explore the prevailing medical theories of the time, delve into the common ailments that plagued the population, and discover the various remedies and treatments employed by healers of all stripes. Along the way, we'll meet some remarkable individuals whose stories shed light on the triumphs and tribulations of this bygone era. But before we plunge into the depths of history, let us first set the stage. Imagine, if you will, a world without the comforts and conveniences we often take for granted. A world where the flickering light of candles and the crackling of hearth fires cast dancing shadows on the walls of thatched cottages and stone castles alike. A world where the rhythms of life were dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, the turning of the seasons, and the tolling of church bells. In this world, the spectre of illness and injury loomed large. Without the benefit of modern sanitation, antibiotics, or surgical techniques, the people of the Middle Ages were particularly vulnerable to the whims of fortune when it came to their health. For the poor, a simple cut or a bout of fever could spell disaster, while even the wealthy and powerful were not immune to the ravages of disease. Yet, in the face of such challenges, medieval people displayed a remarkable capacity for resilience and adaptation. They drew upon a rich tapestry of knowledge and tradition, blending the wisdom of ancient scholars with the folk remedies passed down through generations. They sought solace in the rituals of religion, the counsel of wise women, and the ministrations of those who dedicated their lives to the art of healing. As we embark on this exploration of medieval healthcare, let us approach the subject with a sense of empathy and wonder. Rather than judging the beliefs and practices of the past through the lens of our modern sensibilities, let us strive to understand the context in which they arose and the human stories that lie behind them. In doing so, we may just discover that the people of the Middle Ages were not so different from us after all, seeking comfort, hoping for relief, and marveling at the mysteries of the human body and the world around them. So, dear listener, whether you're winding down after a long day or just beginning your morning, I invite you to settle in, let your mind wander, and allow yourself to be transported to a time long past. Together, we'll explore the fascinating and often surprising world of medieval healthcare, and perhaps gain a newfound appreciation for the resilience and ingenuity of our ancestors in the face of adversity. As we begin our journey, let us first turn our attention to the ways in which medieval people understood the workings of the human body and the causes of illness. At the heart of much medieval medical thought was the theory of the four humours. As we've seen, medieval healthcare was a complex tapestry woven from ancient knowledge, folk wisdom, religious beliefs, and the practical realities of life in the Middle Ages. It was a time when the lines between medicine, faith, and superstition were blurred, and people turned to a wide range of practitioners and remedies in their quest for healing. One such practitioner was the apothecary, a skilled professional who played a vital role in the medieval healthcare system. Apothecaries were the pharmacists of their day, responsible for preparing and dispensing medicines to treat a variety of ailments. They worked alongside physicians and surgeons, but they also served the general public, providing remedies and advice to those who could not afford the services of a trained doctor. The shop of a medieval apothecary was a fascinating place, filled with jars of dried herbs, exotic spices, and mysterious potions. The shelves were lined with earthenware pots labelled in Latin, containing ingredients like licorice root, fennel seed, and borage leaves. Bunches of dried plants hung from the ceiling, their pungent scents mingling in the air. In the back room, the apothecary would have a workshop equipped with a furnace, distilling apparatus, and various tools for grinding, mixing, and preparing medications. The art of the apothecary was a blend of botanical knowledge, practical chemistry, and traditional law passed down through generations. They had to be skilled at identifying and preparing medicinal plants, which they collected from gardens, fields, and forests. Many apothecaries grew their own herbs to ensure a steady supply of fresh, high-quality ingredients. Once the plants were harvested, they had to be processed in various ways to unlock their therapeutic properties. Roots and bark were cleaned and dried, then ground into powders using a mortar and pestle. Flowers and leaves were steeped in boiling water to make infusions, or soaked in alcohol to create tinctures. Ointments and salves were concocted by melting beeswax or animal fats and blending them with herbal extracts and essential oils. The apothecary also had to be adept at combining ingredients according to precise recipes and dosages. Many remedies were complex mixtures containing dozens of different components, each carefully measured and blended together. One of the most famous of these was theriac, a concoction that was said to be an antidote to all poisons and a cure for countless diseases. Its ingredients varied over time and between regions, but could include everything from opium and cinnamon to viper flesh and powdered hoof of elk. Of course, not all of the apothecary's remedies were quite so exotic. Many were simple preparations based on common plants like mint, sage, and chamomile. These were used to treat everyday complaints like indigestion, headaches, and insomnia. Other popular remedies included syrups for coughs and colds, ointments for skin rashes, and tonics to boost energy and vitality. In addition to preparing medicines, the apothecary also served as a general health advisor to the community. People would come to them with all manner of ailments, seeking guidance and reassurance as much as actual treatment. The apothecary would listen to their symptoms, ask questions about their diet and lifestyle, and offer suggestions for maintaining good health. They might recommend changes in diet, like eating more vegetables or avoiding rich foods. They could also provide advice on preventing disease, such as burning fragrant herbs to purify the air during times of plague. For more serious conditions, the apothecary would work closely with physicians to develop an appropriate course of treatment. They would fill prescriptions written by the doctor, making sure to follow the instructions carefully. In some cases, they might even be called upon to administer medications directly, such as applying a plaster to a wound or giving an enema to relieve constipation. The life of a medieval apothecary was not an easy one. They had to work long hours, often in dimly lit and poorly ventilated shops. They were constantly exposed to strong odors and noxious fumes from their concoctions, and they had to deal with the unpredictable demands of their customers, who could be desperate impatient, or simply unable to pay for their services. Yet for all the challenges, there was also a great deal of satisfaction to be found in the apothecary's work. They had the knowledge and skills to help people in a tangible way, easing their pain and offering hope in the face of suffering. They were respected members of their communities, trusted by rich and poor alike, and they played a vital role in the larger system of medieval healthcare, working alongside doctors and surgeons to promote healing and fight disease. In many ways, the medieval apothecary was the forerunner of the modern pharmacist. They laid the foundations for the scientific study of medicinal plants and the standardization of drug preparation. They helped to establish the principle of professional ethics in healthcare, with a focus on patient welfare and the responsible use of powerful substances. And they demonstrated the importance of collaboration between different branches of medicine, recognizing that the best outcomes are achieved when practitioners work together towards a common goal. So the next time you visit your local pharmacy to fill a prescription or pick up some over-the-counter medication, take a moment to remember the long and fascinating history of this essential profession. From the fragrant cluttered shops of the Middle Ages to the gleaming high-tech dispensaries of today, the apothecary has always been there, quietly working to heal the sick and comfort the suffering. Theirs is a noble calling, rooted in ancient wisdom and dedicated to the enduring pursuit of health and wholeness for all. Of course, as much as we may admire the dedication and ingenuity of the medieval apothecary, we must also acknowledge the limitations of their knowledge and the potential dangers of their remedies. Many of the substances they used, like mercury, lead, and arsenic, are now known to be highly toxic. Others, like powdered mummy and unicorn horn, were based on superstition and had no real medicinal value. And some, like theriac, were so complex and variable in their formulation that their effectiveness was largely a matter of chance. Moreover, the lack of standardization and regulation in medieval medicine meant that there was ample room for fraud and quackery. Some apothecaries were more interested in making a quick profit than in providing genuine care, and would sell fake or adulterated medicines to unsuspecting customers. Others claimed to have secret formulas or miraculous cures that could treat any ailment, from baldness to the plague. These challenges were compounded by the general lack of scientific understanding in medieval times. Apothecaries, like most medical practitioners of the era, relied heavily on ancient texts and traditional knowledge rather than empirical evidence or experimentation. They had little grasp of the true causes of disease, and their treatments were often based on misguided theories like the four humours or the doctrine of signatures. Yet despite these limitations, it would be a mistake to dismiss medieval apothecaries as mere charlatans or misguided amateurs. Many were highly skilled and deeply committed to their craft, and they made significant contributions to the development of pharmacy and medicine. They helped to preserve and transmit ancient knowledge, and they played a key role in the early stages of the scientific revolution that would transform healthcare in the centuries to come. Perhaps most importantly, the medieval apothecary embodied a spirit of compassion and care that is at the very heart of the healing arts. In a time when life was often nasty, brutish, and short, they offered comfort and hope to the sick and suffering. They were a beacon of light in the Dark Ages, a reminder that even in the most difficult of circumstances, there are those who will always strive to ease pain and promote healing. So, as we drift off to sleep, let us spare a thought for the medieval apothecary, toiling away in their cluttered shop, surrounded by the scents and sounds of their craft. Let us imagine them grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle, stirring a bubbling cauldron of syrup, or applying a soothing salve to a feverish brow. And let us give thanks for the countless generations of healers who have followed in their footsteps, from the wandering barber surgeons of the Middle Ages to the skilled professionals who staff our hospitals and clinics today. For in the end, The story of medieval healthcare is not just a tale of primitive methods and misguided beliefs. It is a testament to the enduring human spirit, to our innate desire to alleviate suffering and promote well-being. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are always those who will light a candle rather than curse the darkness. And so, as we sink deeper into the warm embrace of sleep, let us hold fast to that light. Let us remember that no matter how bleak the prognosis or how daunting the odds, there is always hope to be found in the caring hands and compassionate hearts of those who dedicate their lives to healing. Let us give thanks for the apothecaries and physicians, the nurses and midwives, and all those who have ever sought to ease the pain and suffering of their fellow human beings. For in the final analysis, that is the true legacy of medieval healthcare. Not the potions and poultices, the leeches and lancets, but the enduring spirit of compassion and care that has always been the heart and soul of the healing arts. It is a spirit that has sustained us through countless plagues and pandemics, through wars and famines and all the trials and tribulations of human history. And it is a spirit that will continue to guide and inspire us as we face the challenges and opportunities of the future. So let us close our eyes and let ourselves be lulled by the gentle murmurs of the past. Let us imagine ourselves in a simpler time, when the world was lit by candlelight and the rhythm of life was measured by the turning of the seasons. Let us picture the apothecary's shop with its jars of herbs and its bubbling cauldrons, and let us take comfort in the knowledge that, no matter how dark the night may seem, there will always be those who work tirelessly to bring us back into the light. Good night, dear listener, and may your dreams be filled with the sweet scent of healing herbs and the gentle touch of caring hands. May you wake refreshed and renewed, ready to face the challenges of the day with the same courage and compassion as the apothecaries of old. And may you always remember that, in the darkest of times, there is always hope to be found in the enduring power of the human spirit. As the Black Death swept through medieval Europe, it left an indelible mark on society and forever changed the course of history. The pandemic was utterly devastating, wiping out an estimated 30 to 60% of Europe's population in just a few short years. It spared no one, striking down rich and poor, young and old alike. The streets of once bustling cities grew quiet as the dead were piled into mass graves. Entire villages were abandoned, their inhabitants either perished or fled. The profound loss of life sent shockwaves through every aspect of medieval life. With so many gone, labour shortages upended the feudal system that had reigned for centuries. Surviving peasants, now in high demand, were able to demand better wages and more rights from the noble landowners. The plague disrupted trade routes and supply chains, causing widespread shortages and economic turmoil. Amidst all this chaos and upheaval, the Catholic Church struggled to cope with the cataclysm. People turned to their faith more than ever for solace and explanation, but the sheer scale of death shook people's beliefs to the core. How could a merciful God inflict such terrible suffering upon Christendom? Many believed the plague must be divine punishment for the sins of mankind. Flagellants took to the streets, whipping themselves bloody in penance. Others looked for someone to blame. Conspiracy theories and scapegoating ran rampant. All across Europe, Jewish communities were accused of poisoning wells to spread the plague. These baseless rumours sparked horrific pogroms. In Strasbourg, hundreds of Jews were publicly burned to death in a single day in 1349. Pope Clement VI spoke out against this anti-Semitic violence, but the hatred and paranoia was difficult to contain. The medical response to the Black Death was woefully inadequate, but medieval doctors did their valiant best with the limited knowledge and resources of the era. Based on the prevailing miasma theory, physicians blamed the disease on corrupted air resulting from foul smells. They reasoned that the air could be purified by burning aromatic herbs and incense. Bonfires of rosemary, juniper, and pine were lit in homes and public squares. People were urged to carry posies of flowers or wear sachets of sweet-smelling spices around their necks. But of course, these measures did little to stop the rampaging bacterium responsible, Yersinia pestis, spread by rat fleas. Physicians also prescribed bloodletting, induced vomiting, and diarrhea as ways to rebalance the four humours thrown out of balance by the pestilence. Various tonics, potions, and poultices were concocted from herbs, spices, and esoteric ingredients like Armenian clay and powdered unicorn horn. Sadly, many of these therapies only worsened patients' already fragile condition. Some plague doctors were municipal practitioners hired by city authorities to treat the infected and enforce quarantines. In certain regions, they donned the iconic beak-like mask, leather hat, waxed leather garments, and gloves. The mask's beak was stuffed with straw and aromatic herbs to filter the air. A wooden cane was used to examine patients from a distance. Although intended as protective gear, we know now that this costume could not have prevented contagion. For the patients, the ominous sight of these grim, faceless figures was surely a chilling omen of their fate. One first-hand account from a plague doctor paints a grim picture of his duties visiting the sick in a medieval town. He writes, "I rise before dawn to make my rounds, as there are always more patients than time. In the dark hours of morning, I don my waxed leather hood, beak mask, gloves, boots, and long gown. Already, the street's miasmic. A foul odour hangs in the air, doubtless the cause of the pestilence. I pause to fill the beak of my mask with dried rosemary, mint, and straw, to filter the corrupt vapours. Entering a home, the first thing one notices is the stillness. Then, the sounds of muffled sobbing and retching from behind closed doors. Entire families huddle together, suffering, with none well enough to tend to the sick. I've learned to steel myself against the desperate, glassy-eyed stares, the pleas for reassurance I cannot truthfully give. I prepare herbal fumigations and insist on cleansing fires, but see few hopeful cases. So many patients are already at death's door, ravaged by fever, their bodies studded with the swollen, oozing buboes. For these unfortunates, I prescribe laudanum to ease their passing. On the streets, I order the collection of corpses and enforce the quarantine of infected houses, painting a red cross on the doors. At day's end, I tally the dead. The figures climb higher each day, beyond reckoning. Despair is my steadfast companion on these grim rounds. I wonder how many souls will perish before this scourge is lifted. I dare not ponder my own fate, for I have witnessed the plague strike down too many young and hale physicians. Fervently, I pray for God's mercy and protection. As this account illustrates, the life of a plague doctor was marked by unimaginable horrors, dangers, and futility. Although some were shunned as harbingers of death, many were respected for their efforts to contain the contagion and ease suffering, however ineffective their methods seemed to modern eyes. Aside from the physical toll, the Black Death also inflicted deep psychological and emotional scars. The ever-present spectre of sudden death and the loss of so many loved ones led to a pervasive sense of dread, despair, and morbid preoccupation. Some abandoned themselves to hedonistic pleasures, adopting a fatalistic eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die attitude. This dismal outlook permeated the art and literature of the era, particularly after the initial plague wave subsided. A genre of macabre writing emerged, dwelling on the inevitability of death and the decay of earthly things. Grim images of the Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, depicted skeletal figures leading people from all walks of life to the grave in a morbid procession. Yet amidst the darkness, there were glimmers of hope and resilience. Not everyone succumbed to paralyzing fear or resigned to apocalyptic doom. Many found solace in religious faith, and the aftermath saw a surge of charitable giving to the church. Communities banded together to support each other through the crisis with mutual aid and compassion. Some scholars believe the Black Death may have accelerated the transition from medieval to early modern society. By disrupting the old feudal order, the plague inadvertently sowed seeds of social change. Rising wages in the wake of the labor shortage allowed some peasants to buy their freedom. A nascent middle class began to emerge in the towns and cities decimated by the pestilence. The pandemic also prompted some of the first efforts at public health measures as city authorities struggled to check the spread. Quarantines, bans on public gatherings, sanitation ordinances, and municipal boards of health arose in the plague's wake, representing early steps towards centralized efforts to safeguard communal welfare. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Black Death was a newfound appreciation for the preciousness and precarity of life. For those who survived the onslaught, the spectre of the plague was a stark reminder of life's fleeting nature. An anonymous 14th century poet captured this sentiment in the haunting refrain: "Timor mortis conturbat me, the fear of death disquiets me." In the final account, the Black Death pandemic stands as one of the defining calamities of the medieval world, a demographic catastrophe and cultural watershed. For those who endured this harrowing chapter of history, it was a visceral lesson in the fragility of human life and the tenuousness of the social order. The plague laid bare the limitations of medieval medicine and shook the foundations of religious faith. Yet it also bore witness to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. As we gently close this chronicle of healthcare in medieval times, it's worth reflecting on the distance traveled between then and now. In many ways, the Middle Ages seem like a remote and alien world, with its humoral theories, bloodletting, and superstitious cures. The medical landscape of today would surely appear just as fantastical to our medieval forebears. Yet for all the strangeness and brutality of medieval medicine, there are also glimmers of familiarity, of healers striving to ease suffering with the knowledge and tools available to them, however meagre. In the tireless efforts of caregivers like Hildegard of Bingen and the anonymous plague doctors, we recognize the same spirit of compassion and duty that animates healthcare workers throughout history. Our medical knowledge has advanced immeasurably since the days of the four humours, but the human experience of illness, suffering, and healing remains a constant across the ages. In studying the healthcare of the past, we gain a deeper appreciation for the common threads of empathy and resilience that bind us to our ancestors. As we drift off to sleep, let us carry with us a sense of gratitude for the medical miracles we often take for granted, and a feeling of kinship with all those who have fought the good fight against disease and infirmity throughout history. The story of medieval healthcare may be filled with darkness, but it is also illuminated by the enduring light of human compassion and the unquenchable quest for healing. And on that note, I bid you good night. And so, despite the limited medical knowledge and often misguided treatments of medieval times, there were some notable individuals who made important contributions to the field of healthcare. One such figure was Hildegard of Bingen, a 12th century German Benedictine abbess who was renowned as a healer, mystic, and scholar. Born in 1098 to a noble family, Hildegard was the youngest of 10 children and was dedicated to the church at a young age. She began having divine visions as a child, but kept them secret for many years. At age 8, Hildegard was sent to live with Jutta, a well-known anchoress, in a monastery near Bingen. There, she received a rudimentary education and learned about herbal medicine and healing. As Hildegard grew older, her visions became more frequent and intense. She described them as a great light that enveloped her and imparted knowledge and understanding. Around age 43, Hildegard had a vision that instructed her to write down everything she had learned. With the encouragement of her friend and secretary, the monk Volmar, Hildegard began recording her visions and medical knowledge in a series of books. Her most famous work, Causae et Curae, Causes and Cures, was an extensive compendium of medieval medicine. In it, Hildegard described the causes and treatments for various diseases based on her understanding of the four humours. She emphasized the importance of balance and moderation in maintaining health and prescribed herbal remedies, dietary changes, and bloodletting to restore equilibrium. Hildegard's approach to medicine was holistic, taking into account the physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects of a person's well-being. She believed that the natural world, with its plants and minerals, held the key to healing, and that humans were intimately connected to the environment. In addition to Causae et Curae, Hildegard also wrote Physica, a book detailing the medicinal properties of plants, animals, and minerals. She meticulously catalogued the healing qualities of over 200 herbs and spices, providing instructions on their preparation and use for different ailments. Hildegard's medical writings were unique in their time for being authored by a woman. While women were often excluded from formal medical training and practice, Hildegard's status as a respected abbess and visionary allowed her to share her knowledge more widely. Her books were circulated throughout Europe and translated into several languages, influencing the practice of medicine for centuries. Beyond her contributions to healthcare, Hildegard was also a gifted composer, writing numerous hymns and musical plays. She corresponded with popes, emperors, and other notable figures of her time, offering spiritual guidance and advice. In her later years, she founded 2 monasteries and embarked on 4 preaching tours, a rarity for a woman in the 12th century. Hildegard of Bingen died in 1179 at the age of 81, leaving behind a rich legacy as a pioneering woman in the fields of medicine, music, and theology. Her holistic approach to healing, emphasis on prevention and natural remedies, and advocacy for balance and moderation foreshadowed many of the principles of modern integrative medicine. While some of Hildegard's ideas were rooted in the limited scientific understanding of her time, her insistence on close observation, documentation, and experimentation helped lay the foundation for the development of evidence-based medicine. Her example also paved the way for future women healers and physicians, challenging the gender barriers in medieval healthcare. Today, Hildegard of Bingen is recognized as a saint by the Catholic Church and is celebrated as a visionary thinker and polymath. Her medical texts continue to be studied by scholars and practitioners of herbal medicine, and her music is still performed and recorded. Hildegard's story serves as an inspiration for all those seeking to break through societal limitations and pursue their passions with courage and conviction. In the grand tapestry of medieval European healthcare, Hildegard of Bingen stands out as a brilliant thread, weaving together the spiritual and the scientific, the artistic and the analytical. Her contributions, along with those of her fellow healers and caregivers, help to alleviate suffering and push forward the boundaries of medical knowledge in a time of great uncertainty and upheaval. As we continue our journey through the annals of medieval medicine, we will encounter other remarkable individuals whose stories shed light on the enduring human quest for health, healing, and understanding. Their struggles, triumphs, and innovations serve as a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit, even in the darkest of times. But for now, let us pause and reflect on the life and work of Hildegard of Bingen, a shining example of what is possible when one follows their calling with passion, intelligence, and an open heart. May her story inspire us to pursue our own paths with courage and conviction, knowing that even the smallest acts of compassion and curiosity can ripple out through the ages, leaving an indelible mark on the fabric of history. And so, as we drift off into the realm of dreams, let us carry with us the wisdom and grace of Hildegard and all those who have dedicated their lives to the noble pursuit of healing. For in the end, it is the stories of these brave and brilliant souls that light the way through the darkness, guiding us towards a brighter, healthier future for all. As we've seen, medieval healthcare was a complex tapestry of ancient wisdom, folk remedies, religious beliefs, and early scientific understanding. While many of the practices may seem primitive or even barbaric to our modern sensibilities, they represented the best efforts of medieval people to combat the constant threats of disease, injury, and premature death. One of the most enduring legacies of medieval medicine was the development of hospitals and formal medical training. The first medieval hospitals emerged in the 6th century, often attached to monasteries or churches. These early institutions were more akin to almshouses or hostels, providing basic care for the poor and sick. But over time, they evolved into more specialized medical facilities. By the 12th century, major cities like Paris, London, and Florence had established hospitals that could treat hundreds of patients. The famous Hôtel Dieu in Paris, founded in 651 AD, could accommodate over 1,000 patients by the 15th century. These hospitals were staffed by a combination of monks, nuns, physicians, surgeons, and apothecaries. Medical training also became more formalized during the Middle Ages. The first medical school in Europe was founded in Salerno, Italy, in the 9th century. Here, students learned about the works of Hippocrates, Galen, and Avicenna, as well as practical skills like preparing medicines and setting bones. By the 13th century, medical faculties had been established at the universities of Bologna, Montpellier, and Paris. However, the path to becoming a licensed physician was long and costly, involving years of study in Latin. As a result, there were never enough university-trained doctors to meet the needs of medieval society. Instead, much of the day-to-day healthcare fell to a diverse group of practitioners with varying levels of education and skill. Surgeons, for example, were often trained through apprenticeships rather than university study. They performed a wide range of procedures, from pulling teeth to amputating limbs to removing cataracts. However, surgery was considered a lower status profession than medicine, and surgeons were typically barred from joining the prestigious physicians' guilds. Apothecaries were another important group of medieval healthcare providers. They prepared and sold medicines, often working closely with physicians to tailor remedies for specific patients. The first apothecary shops began to appear in Europe in the 12th century, and by the 15th century, there were thousands of them across the continent. Apothecaries had to be skilled in identifying and preparing a wide range of ingredients, from common herbs like sage and rosemary to exotic substances like myrrh and frankincense. They used a variety of techniques to make their remedies, including distillation, infusion, and fermentation. Many apothecaries grew their own medicinal plants in special herb gardens. They also traded with merchants to obtain rare and expensive ingredients from distant lands. For example, black pepper from India was highly prized for its supposed ability to treat a wide range of ailments, from indigestion to epilepsy. One of the most famous medieval apothecaries was a woman named Jacoba Felicie, who practiced in Paris in the early 14th century. Jacoba was renowned for her skill in diagnosing and treating illnesses, and she had many loyal patients among the city's wealthy elite. However, as a woman, Jacoba was not allowed to attend university or join the male-dominated medical guilds. Instead, she learned her craft through apprenticeship and practical experience. This was not uncommon for female healthcare providers in the Middle Ages, who often worked as midwives, herbalists, or folk healers. In 1322, Jacoba was brought before the court by a group of male physicians who accused her of practicing medicine without a license. The physicians claimed that Jacoba was a danger to public health and that her success was due to luck rather than skill. But Jacoba mounted a spirited defense, arguing that her practical experience was just as valuable as academic learning. She pointed out that many of her patients had previously been treated by male physicians without success. In the end, the court acquitted Jacoba, but ordered her to stop practicing medicine and refrain from wearing the special robe that identified her as a physician. Jacoba's story highlights the challenges faced by female healthcare providers in the Middle Ages. While women were often the primary caregivers for their families and communities, they were largely excluded from formal medical training and practice. Those who did manage to build successful careers as healers often faced skepticism, harassment, and even persecution from their male colleagues. Despite these obstacles, women played a vital role in medieval healthcare. They served as midwives, assisting with childbirth and caring for newborns. They prepared herbal remedies and folk cures passed down through generations. And in some cases, like Jacoba Felici, they challenged the male-dominated medical establishment and asserted their right to practice their craft. As the Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance and the early modern era, the practice of medicine began to change. New ideas and discoveries, like the circulation of blood and the microscopic world of bacteria, challenged long-held beliefs about the causes and treatments of disease. But many of the foundations of modern healthcare, from hospitals and pharmacies to medical schools and professional licensure, have their roots in the medieval period. By studying the triumphs and failures of medieval medicine, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the ongoing quest to understand and treat the ailments of the human body. Of course, no discussion of medieval healthcare would be complete without mentioning the Black Death, the devastating bubonic plague pandemic that swept through Europe, Asia, and Africa in the 14th century. The Black Death killed an estimated 30 to 60% of Europe's population and had far-reaching social, economic, and cultural consequences. The exact origin of the Black Death is still debated, but it is thought to have begun in the 1330s in the Mongol Empire of Central Asia. From there, it spread westward along trade routes, carried by fleas living on the black rats that often travelled on merchant ships. The first recorded outbreak in Europe occurred in the Crimean port city of Kaffa in 1347. According to a contemporary account, the city was under siege by the Mongol army, which was suffering from the plague. The Mongols reportedly catapulted infected corpses over the city walls in an early form of biological warfare. From Kaffa, the plague spread rapidly across Europe, reaching England, France, Germany, and Scandinavia by 1350. The symptoms were terrifying and gruesome: fever, chills, weakness, and the characteristic buboes, swollen and painful lymph nodes in the groin, armpit, or neck. In the final stages, the skin often turned black and gangrenous, giving the plague its infamous name. Medieval people had no understanding of the true cause of the plague, the Yersinia pestis bacterium carried by fleas. Instead, they attributed it to a variety of supernatural and natural causes, from the wrath of God to the alignment of the planets, to foul-smelling miasmas in the air. Treatments for the plague were equally misguided and often harmful. Some doctors recommended bloodletting or induced vomiting to purge the body of excess humours. Others prescribed exotic remedies like powdered emeralds, Armenian clay, or dried toad. Many people turned to prayer, pilgrimage, or self-flagellation as a means of warding off the disease. One of the most iconic images of the Black Death is the plague doctor, a physician wearing a long black robe, leather gloves, boots, and a bird-like beak mask filled with sweet-smelling herbs to ward off miasmas. Although this costume is often associated with the medieval period, it actually originated in the 17th century, during a later outbreak of bubonic plague. In reality, most medieval doctors fled the cities during the height of the epidemic, leaving the care of the sick to monks, nuns, and local healers. Some cities hired special plague doctors to treat the infected, but their efforts were largely ineffective. The only measures that had any real impact were quarantine and isolation, which helped to slow the spread of the disease. The social and psychological impact of the Black Death was immense. Many people lost faith in the church and the established order, leading to a rise in religious fanaticism and anti-Semitism. The massive loss of life also led to labor shortages and rising wages, which some historians see as a contributing factor to the end of feudalism and the rise of modern capitalism. In the aftermath of the Black Death, some cities began to implement public health measures like quarantine, sanitation, and the regulation of food and drink. The Italian city of Ragusa, modern-day Dubrovnik, was one of the first to establish a formal quarantine system, requiring ships and travelers to wait for 40 days before entering the city. However, these measures were often resisted by merchants and politicians who saw them as bad for business. It would be centuries before the development of modern epidemiology and the germ theory of disease allowed for truly effective public health interventions. The legacy of the Black Death can still be felt in many ways today. The pandemic has been credited with everything from the rise of the Renaissance to the origins of the modern hospital system. It also serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact that infectious diseases can have on human societies. As we grapple with new and emerging diseases in the 21st century, from SARS to Ebola to COVID-19, we can look back on the experiences of our medieval ancestors for lessons and cautionary tales. While modern medicine has made incredible advances, we are still vulnerable to the same forces of nature and human behavior that shaped the course of the Black Death. Perhaps the most enduring lesson of medieval healthcare is the importance of compassion, resilience, and the human spirit in the face of suffering and adversity. The men and women who fought to save lives and ease pain during the Middle Ages, often at great personal risk, embody the best of what it means to be a healer. From the nuns who tended to the sick and dying in plague-ridden hospitals, to the apothecaries who experimented with new and untested remedies, to the surgeons who braved the battlefields to tend to the wounded, these healers faced unimaginable challenges with courage, ingenuity, and grace. Their stories remind us that healthcare is not just a matter of science and technology, but of empathy, compassion, and the unbreakable bonds of human connection. As we continue to face new and daunting healthcare challenges in the years to come, we can draw strength and inspiration from the legacy of our medieval predecessors. So let us end our journey through the annals of medieval healthcare with a sense of awe and appreciation for the men and women who came before us. They may have lived in a world very different from our own, but their struggles, their triumphs, and their unwavering commitment to the art of healing continue to resonate across the centuries. As you drift off to sleep, perhaps you will dream of a medieval apothecary shop, with its shelves lined with jars of exotic spices and its air thick with the scent of herbs. Or maybe you will imagine yourself as a plague doctor, bravely making your rounds through the narrow, winding streets of a stricken city. Whatever your dreams may hold, let the stories of medieval healthcare be a reminder of the enduring power of the human spirit to confront even the darkest of times with hope, resilience, and the unshakable belief that a brighter future is always possible. Good night, and sweet dreams. As the Black Death ravaged Europe in the mid-14th century, leaving devastation and despair in its wake, medieval society grappled with the terrifying reality of a deadly pandemic that seemed to defy all known cures and preventions. In the face of such overwhelming loss and suffering, people turned to their faith, their community, and their medical practitioners for guidance and hope. One such practitioner was a young plague doctor named Giovanni, who found himself on the front lines of the battle against the pestilence in the bustling Italian city of Florence. As a university-trained physician, Giovanni was well versed in the prevailing medical theories of his time, including the belief that the plague was caused by a noxious miasma that corrupted the air and the humours of the body. Armed with this knowledge, and with a heavy heart, he set out each day to visit the homes of the afflicted, offering what meagre treatments and comfort he could. Giovanni's typical attire as he made his rounds was a grim reflection of the dark times in which he lived. He wore a long, waxed leather coat to repel the disease-ridden fluids and miasmas, and a wide-brimmed black hat that signified his profession. But most striking of all was the ominous beaked mask that covered his face, stuffed with sweet-smelling herbs and straw to filter the air he breathed. To the sick and dying, he must have appeared as a terrifying spectre of death itself, an almost inhuman figure who had come to bear witness to their suffering. As he entered each dimly lit, fetid home, Giovanni was met with scenes of unimaginable horror and grief. Entire families lay stricken with the telltale signs of bubonic plague, the painful swollen buboes in the lymph nodes, the blackened skin, the fever and delirium. Some writhed in agony on sweat-soaked pallets, while others huddled in corners, too weak to move or cry out. The air was thick with the stench of sickness and the wails of the bereaved. With a heavy sigh, Giovanni set to work, knowing that there was little he could do to stem the tide of death. He lanced and cauterized the buboes, burning the flesh in a desperate attempt to release the putrid humours. He prescribed potions and tonics made from herbs like angelica, gentian and theriac, which were believed to strengthen the heart and counter the effects of the poison. He offered prayers and last rites, holding the hands of the dying as they slipped away. But despite his best efforts, the plague continued to claim lives at a staggering rate. Giovanni watched helplessly as whole neighborhoods were decimated, their inhabitants carried off to mass graves beyond the city walls. He saw once prosperous merchants reduced to begging in the streets, their wealth and status no protection against the indiscriminate killer. And he felt the weight of his own mortality bearing down on him, knowing that he too could fall victim to the pestilence at any moment. As the long, grim months wore on, Giovanni couldn't help but question the very foundations of his medical knowledge and the efficacy of his treatments. He had been taught that the plague was a divine punishment for sin, that the only true cure lay in prayer and repentance. Yet he saw pious priests and nuns succumb to the disease just as readily as the most dissolute of sinners. He wondered if there might be some other cause, some invisible agent of contagion that spread from person to person, rather than a corruption of the air. These doubts and questions would continue to haunt Giovanni and his fellow physicians long after the Black Death had finally run its course. The sheer scale and devastation of the pandemic had shaken the very foundations of medieval society and called into question long-held beliefs about the nature of disease and the role of medicine. In the years and centuries that followed, a new generation of medical thinkers would begin to challenge the ancient theories of Hippocrates and Galen, seeking new explanations and treatments for the maladies that afflicted humankind. But for Giovanni, as he made his weary way home each night to his own family, praying that they might be spared the ravages of the plague, such lofty considerations were far from his mind. His thoughts were filled with the faces of the dying, the smell of the sick rooms, and the weight of his own helplessness in the face of such overwhelming suffering. Like so many of his fellow citizens, he could only cling to the hope that this too shall pass, that some mercy might yet be found in the midst of the darkness. As we look back on the Black Death from the vantage point of our own time, it's easy to view it as a distant historical curiosity, a morbid fascination from a less enlightened age. But for the people who lived through it, like Giovanni the Plague Doctor, it was a visceral, terrifying reality that tested the limits of human endurance and compassion. In their struggles and their sacrifices, we can find echoes of our own experiences with pandemic disease and a reminder of the resilience and courage of the human spirit in the face of even the darkest of times. The Black Death may have passed into history, but its legacy endures in the medical and public health practices that arose in its wake. The idea of quarantine, of isolating the sick to prevent the spread of disease, has its roots in the medieval response to the plague. The concept of contagion, of illness passing from person to person, began to take hold in the minds of physicians and scholars. And the need for organized, coordinated responses to outbreaks of disease became increasingly clear, laying the groundwork for the development of modern epidemiology and public health systems. In a sense, then, the story of the Black Death is not just a story of death and despair, but also one of resilience, adaptation, and the enduring human quest for understanding in the face of the unknown. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who will step forward to comfort the afflicted, to search for answers, and to light the way forward. And it is a testament to the unbreakable spirit of humanity, which has endured countless plagues and pandemics throughout history, and will continue to do so for as long as we draw breath. As we reflect on the legacy of medieval healthcare and the Black Death, it's worth considering what lessons we might draw for our own time. In an age of rapid global travel, antibiotic resistance, and emerging diseases, the threat of pandemic illness is as real as ever. We have far more advanced medical knowledge and technology than our medieval forebears, but we are not invulnerable. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us of the fragility of our public health systems and the importance of preparedness, cooperation, and compassion in the face of a global health crisis. Perhaps then, the most enduring lesson of the Black Death is the simple truth that we are all in this together. Just as the plague touched every corner of medieval society, from peasants to princes, so too do the health challenges of our time demand a collective response. We must support and care for one another, even as we work to prevent and treat disease. We must honor the sacrifices of those on the front lines of healthcare, just as we honor the memory of those like Giovanni who gave their lives in service to others. And we must never lose sight of our common humanity, our shared vulnerability and strength in the face of the unknown. As we drift off to sleep, let us hold these lessons close to our hearts and let the story of medieval healthcare and the Black Death be a reminder of how far we have come and how far we still have to go. Let us dream of a world where compassion and knowledge triumph over fear and ignorance, where the well-being of all is the highest priority. And let us wake in the morning with renewed commitment to building that world, one small act of kindness and courage at a time. And so we see that even in the midst of the Black Death's unimaginable devastation, there were small glimmers of progress and adaptation in medieval society's approach to healthcare. The hard lessons learned from the plague, such as the importance of sanitation and quarantine measures, would slowly begin to take root in the centuries that followed. Of course, the path forward was not always a straight line. Many of the old beliefs and superstitions about disease persisted long after the Middle Ages had ended. Even as the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries brought a more empirical approach to medicine, doctors and lay people alike still clung to aspects of the old four humours model. It's easy for us now, with our modern medical knowledge, to look back at some medieval practices like bloodletting or astrology and dismiss them as pure quackery. But we must remember that the healers of the Middle Ages were working with the best information and tools they had at the time. In an era when the very causes of disease were still shrouded in mystery, we can hardly blame them for grasping at any potential cure, no matter how far-fetched it may seem to us today. And in many cases, medieval medicine did get some things right, even if it was more by accident than by design. The use of honey as an antibacterial agent for wounds, for example, has been vindicated by modern science. Likewise, many of the herbs and plants used in medieval remedies, have been found to contain active ingredients with real pharmacological effects. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of medieval healthcare is the role of the hospital as a central institution for the care of the sick and suffering. Though the facilities were often primitive and unsanitary by our standards, the idea of providing a dedicated space for the treatment of illness and injury was a crucial one. Over time, these early hospitals would evolve into the more advanced and specialized medical centers we know today. As we've seen, this evolution was driven in part by the tireless work of individuals who sought to expand the boundaries of medical knowledge in their own times. From pioneering women like Trota of Salerno to curious scholars like Hildegard of Bingen, the Middle Ages had no shortage of bright minds working to advance the art of healing, even in the face of great obstacles. Their stories remind us that progress is possible even in the darkest of times. When we look back at the state of medicine in the medieval world, it's easy to focus on all the things they got wrong. But we should also remember the things they got right and the seeds they planted for the future. So the next time you visit a hospital or take a prescribed medication, spare a thought for the long and winding journey that healthcare has taken to get to where it is today. And remember that even in the Middle Ages, with all its plagues and superstitions, there were those who dedicated their lives to the noble cause of easing suffering and saving lives. As we gently drift off to sleep, let us hold in our hearts a sense of gratitude for the healers of the past and for all those who continue their work today. For in the end, the story of medicine is the story of human resilience, compassion, and the unending quest for knowledge in the face of the great unknown. Though the road ahead is still long and uncertain, we can take comfort in knowing that we stand on the shoulders of the healers who came before us, guided by the eternal light of hope and the enduring power of the human spirit. And so, as we close our eyes and let the cares of the day slip away, let us dream of a future where the art of healing has been perfected and where all people can live in health and harmony. Good night and sleep well, secure in the knowledge that the long and fascinating history of healthcare will still be here to greet you in the morning light. Until then, let your mind wander through the centuries, from the first fumbling steps of the medieval apothecary to the cutting-edge innovations of modern medicine. For in the grand tapestry of human progress, every thread counts, and every dreamer has a part to play. And so, we bid you a fond good night, and thank you for joining us on this journey through the annals of medical history. May your dreams be filled with the wisdom of the ages, and may you awake refreshed and inspired to take on the challenges of a new day. Part 4. Herbs, Remedies and Cures. While physicians and hospitals treated the most serious ailments in medieval times, for everyday maladies, most people relied on home remedies and herbal medicines. The use of plants for healing dates back thousands of years. An ancient knowledge of herbs was passed down through generations. Medieval healers had an extensive natural pharmacy to draw upon. Some of the most valued medicinal plants included sage, used for aiding digestion and soothing sore throats; chamomile, prescribed for calming anxiety and promoting sleep; garlic, thought to improve heart health and ward off infectious diseases; and comfrey, applied topically to help heal wounds and broken bones. Other common remedies included elderberry for colds and flu, peppermint for headaches and nausea, and yarrow for reducing inflammation and stopping bleeding. Monasteries often had extensive herb gardens, where monks would cultivate healing plants. The tranquil abbey of Niederaltaich in Bavaria was one such place. Founded in the 8th century along the Danube River, the Benedictine monks there were renowned for their herb garden and healing arts. One can imagine a scene in the abbey's apothecary. The fragrance of drying herbs, rosemary, thyme, lavender, fills the air. Bunches of plants hang from the ceiling beams, while neat rows of earthenware jars line the shelves, each labelled in neat script: Angelica root, wormwood, St. John's wort. A skilled apothecary named Brother Albertus carefully grinds fennel seeds with a mortar and pestle. He's preparing a stomach-soothing tea for a local peasant suffering from griping pains and bloating. With deft hands, Albertus measures out precise quantities of licorice root and peppermint, then combines them with the crushed fennel. Satisfied with the mixture, he pours it into a small linen sack, ties it closed with twine, and hands it to his grateful patient with murmured instructions. For a tonic to strengthen a weak heart, Brother Albertus steeps hawthorn berries and motherwort in boiling water, then strains the deep red liquid into a bottle. To soothe angry, inflamed skin, he mixes a salve of cooled melted beeswax and olive oil, stirring in crushed marigold petals and chickweed. And for a nobleman tormented by gout, he prescribes a syrup of stewed black cherries, sweetened with honey. The practice of apothecaries like Brother Albertus was a combination of art and science, blending folk wisdom with classical Greek and Arabic medical texts. The 9th century Benedictine monk Walafrid Strabo, in his poem Hortulus, praised the healing power of herbs. The garden's glory and its well-tilled earth have power to heal us and renew our mirth. Our weary limbs and aching head may find sweet rest in gardens and a calmer mind. Yet despite the undeniable power of plants, some sought more exotic remedies for their ills, especially the wealthy. Exotic spices like saffron, cinnamon, and ginger were prized for their rarity and believed curative properties. More unusual ingredients were also sometimes used. The 12th century abbess and healer Hildegard of Bingen described using aloe, myrrh, nutmeg, and unicorn horn in her remedies. Yes, unicorn horn. The mythical beast was thought to have all sorts of healing powers in medieval times. In reality, the unicorn horn, traded by merchants and prescribed by doctors, was most likely narwhal tusk or rhinoceros horn. But belief in its curative properties was strong. Physician Ambroise Paré, in his 1582 treatise on unicorns, wrote, "The unicorn is an animal having the head of a horse, the feet of an elephant, the tail of a boar, and a single black horn, 2 cubits in length, in the middle of its forehead. Great virtues are attributed to it, especially against poisons." Other dubious remedies abounded in the medieval apothecary's arsenal. The 15th century English doctor Thomas Fairford recommended grinding up powdered mummy and mixing it with honey to treat abscesses. Crushed emeralds were prescribed for epilepsy, topaz for insomnia, and hematite for nosebleeds. Apothecaries stocked blends of herbs, spices, resins, and minerals known as theriac, touted as cure-alls for everything from plague to snakebite. While some of these ingredients had genuine medicinal value, others were ineffective at best and downright dangerous at worst. Mercury, a highly toxic substance, was used to treat syphilis. White lead powder was applied to the skin as a cosmetic, gradually poisoning those who wore it. Mandrake root, with its vaguely human shape, was associated with all manner of superstitions and magical thinking. Despite these questionable practices, medieval apothecaries were the pharmacists of their day, using the knowledge and ingredients available to them to promote healing. Many herbal remedies developed in the Middle Ages are still used by modern herbalists, a testament to the enduring wisdom of those who intimately understood the power of plants. So the next time you sip a cup of peppermint tea to soothe an upset stomach, or apply an aloe vera salve to a minor burn, you're drawing upon centuries of herbal lore. In the hushed, fragrant stillness of the monastery garden and the apothecary's shop, the art of plant medicine quietly bloomed throughout the Middle Ages, a tradition worth remembering and honouring today. Part 5. The Black Death. But no herbal tonic, blessed amulet, or balm could protect medieval people from the deadliest threat of all, the Black Death. This terrifying plague pandemic swept across Eurasia and North Africa in the 14th century, killing an estimated 75 to 200 million people. It began in 1347, when a ship from the Crimea docked in the Sicilian port of Messina. The ship was a grim sight, with most of its crew dead or dying, their bodies covered in grotesque black boils oozing pus and blood. A death ship. The disease quickly spread from Sicily throughout the rest of Europe, transmitted by fleas carried on the backs of rats. The plague took 3 forms: bubonic, causing swollen, painful lymph nodes or buboes; pneumonic, a severe lung infection; and septicemic, infecting the blood. Victims succumbed quickly, often within days of showing symptoms. In crowded cities like Paris and London, bodies piled up in the streets, faster than they could be buried. The Italian writer Boccaccio described the scene in Florence. Such was the multitude of corpses brought to the churches every day, and almost every hour, that there was not enough consecrated ground to give them burial, especially since they wanted to bury each person in the family grave, according to the old custom. Although the cemeteries were full, they were forced to dig huge trenches, where they buried the bodies by hundreds. Faced with this terrifying and seemingly unstoppable killer, medieval people struggled to understand its cause. The leading theory was that the plague was spread by bad air, or miasma. This idea originated with the ancient Greeks and persisted throughout the Middle Ages. People believed that foul odours from decomposing corpses, stagnant water, and noxious fumes could corrupt the air and cause disease. Some saw the plague as divine punishment for sin and corruption. The medieval chronicle of Henry Knighton recorded, "The judgment of God sent the calamity to punish the sins of men, for the people were corrupt and depraved." Flagellants roamed the countryside, whipping themselves to atone for society's moral decay, which they believed had brought the plague upon them all. Others blamed earthly scapegoats. Lepers, beggars, and outsiders were sometimes persecuted as spreaders of disease. In a disturbing pattern that would resurface in later pandemics, Jewish people were viciously targeted. They were accused of poisoning wells and conspiring to kill Christians. Many Jews were burned alive or exiled from cities. Meanwhile, those who tended to the sick did so at enormous personal risk. Medieval physicians had no understanding of germ theory or infection control. They relied on ancient Greek notions of balancing the 4 bodily humours to treat disease: bloodletting, induced vomiting, and applying foul-smelling ointments were common treatments for plague victims, none of which did anything to halt the disease's progress. Doctors and nurses wore long leather cloaks and beaked masks stuffed with herbs, straw, and spices in a futile attempt to ward off miasma. A 17th century physician wrote of this macabre protective gear. The nose, half a foot long, shaped like a beak, filled with perfume. Under the coat, we wear boots made in Moroccan leather, breeches in goat skin, a short-sleeved blouse in smooth skin, and gloves in thick skin, and a hat and glasses. One can only imagine the dread and despair of a plague doctor visiting the sick in a medieval town. The once bustling market square is eerily deserted, save for a few feral dogs and hollow-eyed orphans. The stench of death and decay hangs thick in the air. A sombre tolling of bells from the church marks yet another passing. With a sigh, the weary doctor knocks on the door of a modest wooden house. The woman who answers is gaunt and wild-eyed with grief. She ushers him into a cramped, dimly lit bedroom, where her husband lies shivering and sweating on a straw pallet. The man's skin is mottled with purplish-black buboes, and the smell of sickness is overpowering. The doctor does what he can to ease his patient's suffering, applying poultices of crushed marigold and aloe, brewing a tonic of elderberry and honey, reciting prayers for divine mercy. But in his heart, he knows these measures are futile. This man, like so many others, will soon be carted away to the overflowing plague pits on the edge of town, leaving another shattered family behind. This grim scene played out countless times across Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa throughout the 14th century. The Black Death profoundly disrupted medieval society, depopulating entire regions, disrupting trade, and destabilizing political and religious institutions. Yet there were some silver linings to this dark chapter of human history. The labor shortage that followed the plague led to better wages and working conditions for the peasant class. The Church's failure to protect its followers from the pestilence undermined its authority and contributed to calls for reform, and the death of so many skilled artisans and scholars spurred innovation, as survivors sought to rebuild and improve upon what was lost. Most importantly, the Black Death forced medieval society to confront its lack of understanding about the causes and spread of disease. In the centuries that followed, public health gradually became a priority. Cities implemented quarantine measures, improved sanitation, and developed early forms of contact tracing to contain outbreaks. While it would take hundreds of more years for the germ theory of disease to be accepted, the hard lessons of the plague set in motion a slow but steady march towards more effective methods of controlling infection. The tireless and heroic efforts of medieval doctors and caregivers, however misguided by modern standards, sowed the seeds of scientific medicine and epidemiology. So as we reflect on healthcare in medieval times, it's important to remember that progress is often born of immense suffering. From the ashes of the Black Death, a new paradigm for understanding and treating disease began to rise, one that would ultimately lead to the development of antibiotics, vaccines, and evidence-based medicine. Though the journey has been long and far from perfect, we owe a debt of gratitude to the medieval healers who did their best with the knowledge and tools available to them. In their struggles, sacrifices, and hard-won insights, we can find both cautionary tales and enduring wisdom about the art of caring for the sick and safeguarding public health. And with that, we gently close this chapter on medieval medicine, in hopes that its hard lessons will continue to inform and inspire us as we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of human health and resilience in our own time. May we face our challenges with the same courage, compassion, and thirst for knowledge as the healers of ages past. And may we never forget that even in the darkest of times, the light of hope and progress endures. Good night and pleasant dreams. As we've seen, the practice of medicine in medieval Europe was a complex tapestry woven from threads of ancient knowledge, folk wisdom, religious doctrine, and superstition. In a time long before microscopes and germ theory, the true causes of most maladies remained shrouded in mystery. For the medieval physician attempting to treat a patient, the first step was often to consult the wisdom of the revered ancient Greek physician Galen. Galen's theories, based on the idea of balancing the four humours, blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm, had held sway for over 1,000 years. If a patient suffered from fever and lethargy, for instance, a doctor may diagnose an overabundance of phlegm and prescribe a hot, dry remedy to restore balance. However, not all medical thinkers accepted Galen's ideas without question. In the 12th century, an extraordinary woman named Hildegard of Bingen began to challenge some of these long-held beliefs. Born into a noble family in the Rhineland, Hildegard entered a Benedictine monastery at a young age, where she received a rare education for a woman of her time. As she grew into adulthood, Hildegard experienced vivid spiritual visions, which she recorded in her works of theology and natural philosophy. But she was also keenly interested in the practical art of healing. In her medical texts, Physica and Causae et Curae, Hildegard drew upon her own observations of the natural world and the human body. While she accepted the basic premise of the four humours, Hildegard also emphasized the importance of prevention and the interconnectedness of physical and spiritual health. She prescribed natural remedies such as herbs, foods, and gemstones, always with an eye towards restoring the body's inherent balance and vitality. Hildegard's approach was holistic and grounded in the belief that the natural world contained cures to humanity's ills, if only one knew where to look. "All of creation is at the disposal of humankind," she wrote. "We must work with it in order to draw sustenance from it. God desires that humans, as rational beings, care for their bodily well-being." This idea that God provided cures through nature was a common belief in the medieval world. Monks and nuns cultivated extensive herb gardens within monastery walls and compiled books of plant-based remedies. The garden was seen as a living pharmacy, a place of healing created by the divine. Yet even with this knowledge, the medieval healers' arsenal against disease remained frustratingly limited. In a time before antibiotics and vaccines, even minor wounds and illnesses could prove deadly if infections set in. And when epidemics like leprosy and plague periodically swept through towns and cities, doctors could only scramble to treat the sick with the tools available to them. Leprosy, also known as Hansen's disease, was a particular scourge in the Middle Ages. This chronic bacterial infection affected the skin, nerves, and mucous membranes, leading to disfiguring sores and progressive disability. In advanced cases, the sufferer's fingers and toes could become shortened and deformed as the cartilage was absorbed into the body. Medieval people had various theories about the cause of leprosy. Some blamed it on imbalanced humours, particularly an excess of black bile. Others saw it as a punishment from God for sinful behaviour. Regardless of the supposed cause, the social stigma surrounding the disease was severe. Lepers were usually banished to live in isolated colonies on the outskirts of towns, shunned by mainstream society. They were required to wear distinctive clothing and to signal their presence with a bell or clapper when venturing near public places. For many, the only recourse was to beg for alms to sustain their bleak existence. Treatment options were limited and often ineffective. Some physicians recommended bloodletting and purging to correct bodily imbalances. Others suggested ointments and salves to soothe the skin lesions. Leper hospitals, run by monastic orders, provided basic palliative care and a place of refuge, if not hope for a cure. The fearsome disease we know today as leprosy actually declined in Europe towards the end of the Middle Ages. Some historians speculate that the bacterium that causes it may have mutated into a less virulent strain. But a new and even more terrifying scourge was about to descend upon the medieval world: the Black Death. In the year 1347, ships from the Crimea docked in Sicily, unleashing an epidemic that would eventually wipe out over a third of Europe's population. The culprit, unknown at the time, was the bacterium Yersinia pestis, carried by fleas that infested the black rats stowing away on merchant ships. The three forms of plague, bubonic, pneumonic, and septicemic, each ravaged the body in their own grim way. Victims of the bubonic plague, the most common form, suffered from agonizing swellings called buboes in the lymph nodes of the groin and armpits. Fever, chills, and muscle cramps racked the body as the contagion took hold. Medieval physicians stood helpless in the face of this onslaught. The usual methods of bloodletting and purging did nothing to halt the disease's progress. Some doctors tried lancing the buboes to release the bad humours, but this often only accelerated the patient's decline. As the death toll mounted and panic gripped the populace, many turned to spirituality and superstition for answers. Processions of flagellants roamed the countryside, whipping themselves into a religious fervour in the belief that the plague was a punishment for humanity's collective sins. Others blamed Jews, foreigners, and other marginalised groups, leading to horrific violence and persecution. In the midst of this chaos, a new figure emerged on the medical scene: the plague doctor, clad head to toe in a protective leather outfit, with glass eyes and a long beak stuffed with sweet-smelling herbs to ward off miasma. These physicians were a fearsome sight. They moved from town to town, offering their services to the afflicted. One such doctor was a Frenchman named Nostradamus. Before he gained fame as a prophet and astrologer, Nostradamus worked as a plague physician in Provence during the 1520s. He developed his own unique methods for treating the disease, including a rose pill made from herbs, flowers, and spices. While Nostradamus claimed success with his cures, the reality is that most plague victims succumbed regardless of what treatments were administered. It's estimated that between 75 and 200 million people perished during the Black Death of the 14th century, an almost unfathomable loss of human life. The plague would continue to resurface in periodic outbreaks throughout the medieval and early modern eras, each time sowing fear and devastation. But it also had some unexpected consequences for the development of medicine and public health. In the aftermath of the Black Death, there was a growing realization among officials that coordinated measures were needed to prevent the spread of epidemic disease. Cities began to appoint public health boards to oversee sanitation, quarantine sick individuals, and regulate the activities of doctors and apothecaries. There was also a renewed interest in understanding the causes of disease and developing more effective treatments. The Renaissance saw a revival of the study of anatomy, as scholars like Andreas Vesalius began to dissect human corpses and produce detailed drawings of the body's internal structures. Slowly but surely, the foundations were being laid for the scientific revolution that would transform medicine in the centuries to come. But for the people of the Middle Ages, the mysteries of health and disease remained largely in the realm of the divine. As we've seen, healthcare in medieval Europe was a complex blend of the spiritual and the practical, the ancient and the innovative. From the herb gardens of Hildegard of Bingen to the protective robes of the plague doctors, medieval healers drew upon all the knowledge and tools at their disposal to combat the ever-present spectre of illness and mortality. It's easy from our modern vantage point to view medieval medicine as primitive and misguided, rife with superstition and folk remedies. But we must remember that these were people doing their best with the limited information and resources they had. In a world lit only by fire, without the benefit of modern science and technology, they struggled to make sense of the mysteries of the human body and the natural world. And yet, there were glimmers of progress and innovation amidst the darkness. The medieval period saw the rise of universities and the systematization of medical education. Hospitals began to develop from simple places of care for the poor and sick into more organized institutions. The practice of surgery and pharmacy became more regulated and professional. Perhaps most importantly, there was a growing recognition of the role that public health measures could play in preventing the spread of disease. From the quarantining of lepers to the boarding up of plague-ridden houses, medieval societies began to take collective action against the threat of epidemic illness. These were small steps, to be sure, on the long and winding road to modern medicine, but they were steps nonetheless, taken by individuals of courage, compassion, and curiosity in an age of great uncertainty. Figures like Hildegard of Bingen, Trotta of Salerno, and even the anonymous plague doctors toiling in the shadows. These were the healers who laid the foundation for the medical advances to come. As we gaze back across the centuries, it's tempting to see only the darkness and suffering of a world so different from our own. But we must also remember the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit, the eternal striving to understand and to heal. The medieval physician, poring over an ancient text by candlelight, seeking wisdom in the stars and the herbs of the field. The tired monk, offering a prayer and a soothing touch to a fevered brow. The determined midwife, drawing upon generations of folk knowledge to bring new life into the world. These are the faces of medieval medicine, the healers who fought the good fight against the spectre of disease and death. And while their methods may seem foreign to us now, their legacy endures in the eternal quest to ease suffering and prolong life. As we drift off to sleep, Let us dream of a world where their hard-won knowledge and courage paved the way for the wonders of modern medicine we enjoy today. And let us never forget the debt we owe to these medieval healers, who did the best they could with the tools they had, in a time of great darkness and great hope. As we've seen, medieval healthcare was a complex tapestry woven from strands of ancient knowledge, folk wisdom, religious beliefs, and the practical realities of a pre-modern world. While it's easy to dismiss medieval medicine as primitive or misguided from our vantage point today, we must remember that the healers of the Middle Ages were working with the best information and tools available to them at the time. They were not bumbling quacks or ignorant charlatans, but rather individuals grappling with the immense challenges of illness and injury in an era long before germ theory, antibiotics, or even basic sanitation. One such individual was a woman named Trota of Salerno, who lived in the 12th century in the southern Italian city of Salerno. Trota was a remarkable figure in many ways, a female physician in a field dominated by men, a prolific writer on medical topics, and a practitioner whose skill and knowledge were sought out by patients from all walks of life. Salerno, where Trota lived and worked, was a center of learning in the Middle Ages, known for its prestigious medical school, which attracted students from across Europe. The school was unique in that it welcomed both male and female students, and even counted several women among its faculty. It was in this relatively progressive environment that Trota was able to receive an extensive education in medicine and establish her own practice. Trota's main area of expertise was women's health, and she wrote several influential texts on the topic, including treatments for infertility, menstrual problems, and complications of childbirth. Her works were widely circulated and translated, and remained popular references for centuries after her death. But Trota was not just a theorist. She was also a hands-on practitioner who treated patients from all social classes. Records show that she attended to noblewomen and royalty, but also provided care for the poor and destitute. Her compassion and dedication to her patients set her apart in an age when many physicians prioritized wealthy patrons over those in greatest need. Despite her renown in her own time, Trota's story was largely forgotten in subsequent centuries, and many of her writings were misattributed to male physicians. It is only in recent decades that scholars have begun to piece together the details of her life and work, and to give her the credit she deserves as a pioneering woman in medicine. Trota's legacy is a reminder that even in the so-called Dark Ages, there were glimmers of light. Individuals who pursued knowledge, challenged societal norms, and worked tirelessly to alleviate suffering. Her story also underscores the often overlooked contributions of women to the history of science and medicine. As we delve further into the annals of medieval healthcare, we'll encounter more figures like Trota, men and women who strive to understand the workings of the human body and to devise treatments for the myriad afflictions that plagued their communities. Some of their ideas may seem quaint or even dangerous to us now, but they represent important steps on the long and winding road to modern medicine. One of the most ubiquitous and enduring practices in medieval medicine was the use of herbal remedies. From the humblest peasant to the wealthiest noble, people in the Middle Ages relied on plants to cure their ills and maintain their health. Herbal medicine was not just a folk tradition, but a highly developed science, with roots stretching back to ancient civilizations like Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Medieval healers had an extensive knowledge of the medicinal properties of plants, which they gathered from fields, forests, and carefully tended gardens. They knew how to prepare herbal remedies in various forms: teas, tinctures, poultices, ointments, and powders, to target specific ailments and bodily imbalances. Some of the most commonly used herbs in medieval medicine included sage, known for its antiseptic and digestive properties; rosemary, believed to improve memory and relieve muscle pain; chamomile, prized for its calming effects; and yarrow, used to staunch bleeding and heal wounds. Other popular remedies included St. John's wort for depression, valerian for insomnia, and garlic for a host of ailments ranging from toothache to plague. Of course, not all medieval herbal remedies were effective, and some were downright dangerous. Many plants used in medicine, such as foxglove and belladonna, are poisonous if used incorrectly, and the lack of standardization in herbal preparations meant that the potency of a remedy could vary widely depending on factors like the season of harvesting, the method of storage, and the skill of the preparer. Despite these limitations, herbal medicine was often the first line of defense against illness in the Middle Ages, and in many cases, it was the only treatment available. For the average person, a visit to a trained physician was a rare and expensive luxury, reserved for the most serious conditions. Instead, people relied on local healers, wise women, and their own knowledge of herbs to treat everyday complaints like headaches, indigestion, and skin rashes. The preparation of herbal remedies was a time-consuming and labor-intensive process, often involving multiple steps and precise measurements. A skilled apothecary might spend hours or even days concocting a single medicine, carefully selecting and combining the ingredients according to ancient recipes or their own hard-won knowledge. Imagine, if you will, the interior of a medieval apothecary's shop. A dim, cluttered space filled with the pungent aromas of dried herbs, exotic spices, and medicinal oils. The walls are lined with shelves bearing jars and bottles of every shape and size, each one labelled with cryptic symbols and Latin names. At the centre of the room, the apothecary hunches over a large wooden table, mortar and pestle in hand, grinding seeds into a fine powder that will form the base of a healing salve. As the day wears on, a steady stream of customers arrives at the shop, each one seeking a remedy for a different ailment. The apothecary listens patiently to their complaints, asking questions about their symptoms and lifestyle. He consults his well-thumbed texts and draws on years of accumulated wisdom to select the appropriate herbs and dosages. For a woman suffering from menstrual cramps, he prepares a tea of raspberry leaf and cramp bark, sweetened with honey to make it more palatable. For a man plagued by indigestion, he measures out a precise blend of fennel, ginger, and peppermint to be chewed after meals. And for a child with a persistent cough, he mixes a syrup of wild cherry bark and licorice root to be taken by the spoonful 3 times a day. As the apothecary works, he reflects on the weight of his responsibility, the trust that his customers place in his knowledge and skill. He knows that a single mistake, a misidentified herb, or an incorrect dose could mean the difference between life and death. But he also takes pride in his craft, in the ability to harness the healing power of nature to bring comfort and relief to the suffering. The apothecary's trade was not without its challenges and risks. In addition to the ever-present danger of accidental poisoning, apothecaries often found themselves on the front lines of public health crises, such as outbreaks of plague or dysentery. They were called upon to prepare vast quantities of medicines and protective tonics, often working around the clock to meet the needs of their communities. Moreover, the apothecary's shop was not immune to the social and economic upheavals of the Middle Ages. In times of war or famine, the supply of essential herbs and ingredients could be disrupted, forcing apothecaries to improvise or rely on inferior substitutes. And as with any trade that dealt in valuable commodities, the apothecary's business was vulnerable to competition, regulation, and even outright persecution. In some cases, apothecaries were accused of witchcraft or heresy, particularly if their remedies were seen as unorthodox or if they catered to marginalized groups like the poor or the elderly. The line between medicine and magic was often blurred in the medieval mind, and those who dabbled in the healing arts were sometimes viewed with suspicion or outright hostility. Despite these challenges, the apothecary's shop remained a fixture of medieval life. a place where people from all walks of life could seek help and solace in times of illness and suffering. And while the specific remedies and techniques may have varied from place to place and era to era, the fundamental goal of the apothecary remained the same: to use the tools of their trade to alleviate pain, restore balance, and promote healing. As we continue our journey through the annals of medieval healthcare, we'll encounter many more individuals like the skilled and compassionate apothecary, men and women who dedicated their lives to the art and science of healing, often in the face of great adversity. Their stories are a testament to the enduring human impulse to understand and protect the fragile workings of the body, even in an age of great uncertainty and limited knowledge. But the story of medieval healthcare is not just a story of individual healers and their remedies. It is also a story of the broader social and cultural forces that shaped the way people thought about illness, health, and the human body. And perhaps no event in medieval history had a greater impact on these ideas than the devastating pandemic known as the Black Death. The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, swept through Europe, Asia, and Africa in the 14th century, claiming the lives of an estimated 75 to 200 million people. It was a catastrophe on a scale that is difficult for us to imagine today, with entire villages and cities being wiped out in a matter of months. The plague first arrived in Europe in 1347, likely carried by fleas on the backs of rats that travelled on merchant ships from Asia. It quickly spread along trade routes and waterways, reaching every corner of the continent within a few years. The symptoms were terrifying: fever, chills, weakness, and the appearance of dark, swollen buboes in the lymph nodes. Death often followed within days or even hours of the first signs of illness. In the face of such a devastating outbreak, medieval people struggled to understand the causes and nature of the disease. Many turned to religion, seeing the plague as a punishment from God for the sins of humanity. Others blamed minority groups, such as Jews or foreigners, for spreading the illness through poisoning or sorcery. Medical theories about the plague were often based on the prevailing ideas of the time, such as the belief in the four humours or the influence of celestial bodies. Some doctors believed that the plague was caused by corrupted air, or miasma, that could be purified through the use of fragrant herbs and spices. Others recommended bloodletting, purging, and the use of poultices to draw out the poison from the body. In reality, these treatments did little to stem the tide of the epidemic, and in some cases may have even worsened the suffering of the afflicted. The true cause of the plague, the Yersinia pestis bacterium carried by fleas and rats, would not be discovered until centuries later. Despite the limitations of medieval medicine, there were some glimmers of hope and progress during the time of the Black Death. In some cities, officials implemented public health measures such as quarantines, the disposal of corpses, and the cleaning of streets and houses. These efforts, while not always effective, represented an early recognition of the importance of sanitation and disease control. Moreover, the experience of the plague led to a heightened awareness of the fragility of life and the interconnectedness of human society. In the aftermath of the epidemic, there were significant changes in social and economic structures, as well as in art, literature, and religion. The Black Death marked a turning point in European history, one that would have profound and lasting impacts on the development of science, medicine, and public health. One of the most iconic figures to emerge from the time of the Black Death was the plague doctor, a specialized medical practitioner who was tasked with treating the sick and dying during outbreaks of the disease. Plague doctors were often hired by cities or towns to provide care for the afflicted, and they were expected to follow strict protocols to prevent the spread of the illness. The most recognizable feature of the plague doctor was their distinctive costume, which typically included a long waxed leather coat, gloves, boots, and a wide-brimmed hat. But perhaps the most striking element of the plague doctor's attire was the beak-like mask that covered their nose and mouth. This mask was stuffed with straw, herbs and spices, which were believed to purify the air and prevent the doctor from inhaling the deadly miasma. Imagine, if you will, the scene in a medieval town during the height of the Black Death. The streets are eerily quiet, with only the occasional sound of a cart carrying away the dead. The air is thick with the stench of decay and the smoke of burning herbs. And then, emerging from the shadows, comes the figure of the plague doctor, a grim spectre in black, with a beak-like mask and a long, ominous cane. The doctor moves from house to house, tending to the sick and the dying with a mixture of practicality and fatalism. He administers what remedies he can: a poultice of onions and garlic, a tincture of rosemary and sage, a draught of vinegar and water. But he knows that for many of his patients, these treatments will be of little use. The plague is a fierce and unrelenting foe, and even the most skilled physician can only do so much in the face of its onslaught. As the doctor works, he records his observations in a journal, noting the symptoms and progression of the disease, as well as any potential treatments or preventative measures. He is a man of science, after a fashion, but he is also a man of faith, and he sees his work as a sacred duty, a way of bringing comfort and solace to the suffering in their final moments. The Plague Doctor's Journal is a grim and harrowing document, filled with accounts of unimaginable suffering and loss. But it is also a testament to the resilience and courage of the human spirit, even in the darkest of times. The doctor writes of families banding together to care for their loved ones, of neighbours helping each other to bury the dead, of moments of kindness and compassion amidst the chaos and despair. As the epidemic rages on, the plague doctor becomes a fixture of the town, a symbol of both hope and despair. Some see him as a saviour, a brave and selfless healer who risks his own life to help others. Others see him as a harbinger of death, a grim reaper who brings only suffering and sorrow in his wake. But the plague doctor himself sees his role in a different light. He is neither hero nor villain, but simply a man doing his best in impossible circumstances. He knows that he cannot save everyone, but he also knows that every life he touches is precious, and that every moment of comfort he can provide is a small victory against the darkness. In the end, the Black Death will claim countless lives, and the plague doctor will be powerless to stop it. But his work will not be in vain. The knowledge he has gathered, the observations he has made, will be passed down to future generations, helping to build the foundations of modern medicine and public health. And the legacy of the plague doctor will endure, not just as a historical curiosity, but as a symbol of the enduring human spirit, the capacity for compassion and selflessness, even in the face of unimaginable horror. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are always those who will step forward to help, to heal, and to hope. As we come to the end of our journey through the annals of medieval healthcare, it is worth reflecting on the lessons we can learn from this distant and often difficult history. It is easy, from our vantage point in the 21st century, to look back on the Middle Ages as a time of ignorance and superstition, a dark age in which little progress was made in the understanding and treatment of disease. But to do so would be to overlook the remarkable achievements and innovations of medieval healers, who worked tirelessly to alleviate suffering and promote health in the face of immense challenges. From the herbal remedies of the skilled apothecary to the selfless dedication of the plague doctor, medieval medicine was a complex and multifaceted field, shaped by a wide range of social, cultural, and intellectual forces. Moreover, the story of medieval healthcare is not just a story of the past, but a story that continues to resonate in our own time. Many of the issues and challenges that confronted healers in the Middle Ages, the spread of infectious disease, the need for effective public health measures, the importance of compassion and empathy in the face of suffering, are still with us today. Indeed, as we grapple with our own global pandemic, we may find ourselves looking back to the lessons of history for guidance and inspiration. We may draw strength from the courage and resilience of those who came before us, who faced the horrors of the Black Death with determination and grace. And we may find hope in the knowledge that, even in the darkest of times, the human spirit has always found a way to persevere, to adapt, and to heal. So let us remember the healers of the Middle Ages, not as primitive or misguided, but as fellow travelers on the long and winding road of medical history. Let us honor their contributions and sacrifices, and let us learn from their successes and failures, and let us carry forward their legacy of compassion, curiosity, and hope as we continue to work towards a healthier and more equitable world for all. As we drift off to sleep, let us hold in our hearts the stories of those who came before us, who struggled and suffered and triumphed in the face of unimaginable odds. Let us dream of a future in which their wisdom and courage continue to guide us, and in which the healing arts are a source of comfort and hope for all who need them. And let us rest easy in the knowledge that, no matter how dark the night may seem, the dawn will always come, and with it, the promise. Part 3. Medieval Hospitals and Caregivers. Continued. Rahira's vision for a hospital to serve the needy slowly came to fruition. St. Bartholomew's began as a small, humble institution, with just a handful of monks tending to the sick and destitute. The hospital's main ward was a long, narrow room with rows of simple wooden beds. Patients were cared for regardless of their social status or ability to pay. The monks followed a daily routine of prayer, labour, and caring for the ill. They grew medicinal herbs in the hospital gardens and prepared remedies in the small apothecary. Bloodletting, a common treatment believed to restore bodily humours, was performed by the monks using fleams or leeches. Faith and religious rites were integral to the healing process, with the monks offering prayers and blessings over their suffering charges. As word of St. Bartholomew's compassionate care spread, the hospital began to expand. New wards were added to accommodate more patients. The hospital also began to attract physicians and surgeons who could provide more specialised treatments. These practitioners were not monks, but laymen who had received medical training at universities or through apprenticeships. They worked alongside the religious brothers, blending spiritual and secular healing arts. One of the challenges faced by St. Bartholomew's and other medieval hospitals was the frequent outbreaks of infectious diseases. When plague or other epidemics struck, the hospital could quickly become overwhelmed with the sick and dying. The close quarters and limited understanding of contagion meant that diseases could spread rapidly among patients and staff. During such crisis times, the monks redoubled their efforts, working tirelessly to ease suffering and provide what comfort they could. Despite the limitations of medieval medicine, hospitals like St. Bartholomew's offered vital care to their communities. They served not only as places of healing, but also as refuges for the poor, homeless, and infirm. For many sick individuals, the hospital represented their only hope of receiving treatment and nursing. As we'll explore later, women also played important roles as caregivers in medieval hospitals and society at large. While barred from university medical training, women served as nurses, midwives, and practitioners of folk medicine. One remarkable example was the 12th century female physician Trotta of Salerno, whose story we will turn to next. But for now, let us picture the scene at Old St. Bartholomew's Hospital in those early days. The flickering light of candles illuminates the faces of the sick and suffering. A monk moves quietly from bed to bed, murmuring prayers and offering sips of herbal infusions. In this small haven, the work of healing both body and spirit continues through the long night. and so it would for centuries to come, through times of tragedy and triumph, a testament to the enduring human impulse to care for one another in times of need. Women in medicine, female practitioners, restrictions, and folk healers. In the male-dominated world of medieval Europe, women faced significant restrictions in their ability to participate in the formal practice of medicine. The Catholic Church, which controlled most hospitals and universities, largely excluded women from these institutions. The prevailing belief was that the proper place for a woman was in the home, not in the public sphere of healthcare. However, this did not mean that women were absent from the medieval medical landscape. On the contrary, they played vital roles as caregivers, midwives, and practitioners of traditional healing arts. In many ways, women were the unsung heroes of medieval healthcare, providing essential services to their communities despite the limitations placed upon them. One area where women's expertise was widely recognized was in midwifery. Childbirth in the Middle Ages was a perilous affair, with high rates of maternal and infant mortality. In the absence of male physicians, who generally did not involve themselves in the birthing process, midwives were the primary attendants for women in labor. These skilled women, often trained through apprenticeship or passed down knowledge, assisted with deliveries, administered herbal remedies to ease pain and complications, and cared for the mother and child in the crucial days following birth. Beyond midwifery, women also served as nurses and caregivers in hospitals and in their local communities. In many medieval hospitals, it was nuns who provided much of the daily care to patients, feeding, bathing, and administering medicines. These women, though not formally trained as physicians, developed significant practical knowledge of healing through their hands-on experience. Outside of institutional settings, women were also keepers of folk medical traditions. In villages and towns across Europe, wise women and female healers utilized herbal remedies, charms, and rituals to treat common ailments. These practices, passed down through generations, often incorporated a blend of empirical knowledge of medicinal plants and more supernatural beliefs. However, the line between folk healing and witchcraft was often blurry in the eyes of medieval authorities. Women who practiced traditional medicine sometimes faced accusations of sorcery or heresy, particularly in the later Middle Ages when witch hunts began to sweep across Europe. The idea of the female healer as a dangerous, subversive figure reveals the deep-seated misogyny and fear of women's power that permeated medieval society. Yet even in the face of such threats, many women continued to practice their healing arts. Some even gained renown for their medical expertise. One such figure was Trota of Salerno, a 12th century Italian physician who broke gender barriers in the male-dominated world of medieval medicine. Story: Trota of Salerno, the 12th century Italian physician who wrote influential texts on women's health. In the coastal town of Salerno, Italy, there lived a remarkable woman named Trota. Born in the early 12th century to a wealthy family, Trota defied societal expectations by pursuing an education in medicine. At the time, Salerno was home to a famous medical school which attracted students from across Europe. Although women were not officially admitted to the school, Trota managed to gain access to the teachings through family connections and her own determination. Trota's interests lay particularly in the area of women's health. In an era when male physicians often neglected or misunderstood the unique medical needs of women, Trota sought to fill that gap. She began to write medical texts specifically addressing issues like menstruation, fertility, and childbirth. Her works, which drew upon both ancient Greek medical knowledge and her own clinical observations, offered practical advice and remedies for common women's health complaints. One of Trotta's most influential texts was the Treatments for Women, also known as the Trotula. This compendium of gynecological and obstetrical knowledge covered topics ranging from conception and pregnancy to menstrual disorders and uterine prolapse. The Trotula advocated for a compassionate, patient-centered approach to women's healthcare. It emphasized the importance of listening to women's own experiences and tailoring treatments to their individual needs. Trotta's progressive approach extended beyond the pages of her texts. She is believed to have practiced medicine in Salerno, treating both female and male patients. Her reputation as a skilled physician spread, and she attracted patients from far and wide seeking her expert care. Trotta's story is all the more remarkable given the constraints placed on women in medieval society. In an era when women were largely excluded from formal education and professional life, Trotta managed to carve out a space for herself as a respected medical authority. Her legacy endured long after her death, with her texts being widely circulated and translated across Europe. The Trotula, in particular, became a standard reference work in medieval and early modern medicine. Its popularity is a testament to the enduring relevance of Trotta's insights into women's health. However, as the text was copied and disseminated over the centuries, Trotta's authorship was often obscured or attributed to male physicians. This erasure of her contributions reflects the broader marginalization of women in the history of medicine. Today, scholars are working to reclaim Trotta's rightful place in the annals of medical history. Her story serves as an inspiration to modern readers, a reminder of the power of knowledge, compassion, and determination to transcend societal barriers. In a time when women's voices were often silenced, Trotta of Salerno spoke out for the health and dignity of all women. As we continue our exploration of medieval healthcare, we turn now to the tools and remedies employed by practitioners like Trotta. In a world without modern pharmaceuticals or surgical techniques, healers relied on a complex blend of herbal knowledge, ancient wisdom, and sometimes bizarre and dangerous treatments. The medieval apothecary was a place of both genuine medical innovation and superstitious quackery, as we'll discover in our next chapter. But first, let us pause and reflect on the contributions of women like Trotta to the history of medicine. Though often overlooked or forgotten, these pioneering female healers played a vital role in easing suffering and pushing the boundaries of medical knowledge. Their stories remind us of the enduring human impulse to heal, to care, and to alleviate the pain of others, even in the face of great adversity. As we drift off to sleep, we carry with us a sense of gratitude and admiration for these unsung heroines of the medieval medical world. As the Black Death subsided and medieval Europe began its slow recovery, the legacy of this terrible pandemic would endure for centuries. The profound loss of life had shaken society to its core, leaving deep psychological scars and a heightened awareness of the fragility of human existence. Yet amidst the devastation, there were glimmers of progress and resilience. The experience of the plague had underscored the importance of public health measures, like quarantines, sanitation, and the careful disposal of bodies. While these practices were often crude and inconsistently applied, they represented a growing understanding of how disease could spread and be contained. Cities began to appoint dedicated plague doctors and health officials, laying the groundwork for more organized responses to future outbreaks. At the same time, the Black Death had exposed the limitations and failures of traditional medieval medicine. The humoral theories and superstitious remedies of physicians had proven powerless against the onslaught of the plague, leading many to question the established medical wisdom. In the aftermath, there was a renewed interest in empirical observation and practical knowledge. Surgeons, apothecaries, and lay healers gained greater respect as people sought out treatments that showed tangible results. The plague also had a profound impact on the development of hospitals and charitable institutions. As the sick and dying overwhelmed existing facilities, many cities were forced to establish new hospitals and pest houses to cope with the influx. These institutions would evolve over time, becoming more specialized and better equipped to handle a range of medical needs. Wealthy patrons endowed hospitals and almshouses as acts of piety and social responsibility, reflecting a growing sense of civic duty in the face of suffering. Yet even as medieval society grappled with the lessons of the Black Death, many of the old beliefs and practices persisted. The humoral theory continued to dominate medical thinking for centuries, and superstitious ideas about disease remained widespread. Bloodletting, purging, and other harmful remedies were still commonly prescribed by doctors, even as some voices called for a more rational approach to medicine. It would take the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment to truly transform the Western understanding of health and the human body. But the seeds of this change were sown in the aftermath of the Black Death, as medieval people confronted the limits of their knowledge and began to seek new ways of understanding and treating disease. As we look back on the healthcare of the Middle Ages from our modern vantage point, it's easy to focus on the limitations and misconceptions of the time. The lack of antibiotics, antiseptics, and basic anatomical knowledge undoubtedly led to much suffering and loss of life. But it's important to remember that medieval people were not primitive or ignorant. They were grappling with complex challenges using the tools and understanding available to them. And in many cases, they displayed remarkable ingenuity and compassion. The story of medieval healthcare is ultimately one of resilience in the face of incredible adversity. From the tireless work of monastic healers to the sacrifices of plague doctors, from the folk wisdom of midwives to the scholarly pursuits of philosophers, medieval society mobilized every resource it had to combat sickness and promote healing. Though their methods were often flawed and their understanding incomplete, their efforts laid the foundation for the medical advances that would follow. So as we drift off to sleep, let us hold in our hearts a sense of kinship with our medieval ancestors. They too knew the fear of illness and the sorrow of loss, and they too found strength in community, faith, and the unquenchable human spirit. In their stories, we can find not just fascinating history, but a reminder of our common humanity across the centuries. And so our journey through the annals of medieval healthcare comes to a close. But the legacy of these brave healers and visionary thinkers lives on in the work of doctors, nurses, and researchers today who continue to push the boundaries of medical knowledge and to bring hope and healing to those in need. If you enjoyed this quiet exploration of a pivotal era in medical history, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. There are so many more fascinating stories waiting to be told. Stories to educate, to inspire, and to lull you into a peaceful slumber. Until next time, sweet dreams and good health to you all.